It's time for the first college football playoff eliminator of the 2024 season. And normally when we start this off, we do week one, we can pretty much eliminate all the group of 5 teams. In seasons past, there might be 1 or 2 teams that would have a potential path if they went undefeated to get to the college football playoff. But normally almost every group of 5 team would be eliminated. But it's different. We've got a 12-team playoff, and this is going to be a totally different series. And honestly, I don't even know exactly how I'm going to do it. But we're just going to basically look at the playoff picture here heading into week one. No one's eliminated. We have no eliminations. Even if, it's going to take a few weeks really to start eliminating any teams, because teams will still technically be alive in their conference races. And 3 losses. I mean, could we even possibly see a 4-loss team staying alive? So yeah, it's going to take some time to eliminate teams. I'd love to get any ideas from any of you on how we can keep this series going, at least in the early, as we get later into the season. Obviously we'll be able to eliminate teams, but early on, I mean, basically it's just kind of updating the playoff picture based off of what's happened so far. And so we'll do this kind of first with my preseason thoughts and go through each conference. So here we go. We'll start with the new eliminations. Again, there are none. There are no new eliminations. And like I said, we won't really have any eliminations until, I don't know, October, maybe. Maybe we have some eliminations then. We may have to kind of stretch that out a little bit. If Vandy starts 0-2 in SEC play, I think you can go ahead and eliminate them, because they're not going to come back from that. We can kind of have like a soft elimination, if that makes sense. But let's go through the teams now. So we'll start with the SEC. The favorites in the SEC: Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas. These teams seem to be, and when I say favorites, yeah, this is my opinion, but it's also just kind of looking at the national narrative around all the teams. So kind of what everyone is expecting as a group. But of course, I'm in that group as well. And yeah, I'm going to put my thoughts in here as well. But Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, those teams seem to be the favorites to win the SEC. And then you've got your top contenders for an at-large spot: LSU, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Missouri. So you've got 8 teams in the SEC that have a real shot. Like, these teams, if I'm a fan of these teams, I'm thinking, hey, let's get to the college football playoff. I think we can do it. I think we got a shot. That should be the goal for this season. So yes, absolutely, these 8 teams have a shot. Now, again, these teams right here probably have a better chance of getting in if they go 10-2 and they don't even go to the SEC championship and they get an at-large spot. I don't know what's going to happen. We've talked about this. What if you get a 10-2 team? They get to the college football playoff. They're ranked number 10 or 11. They lose, or excuse me, they get to their conference championship game. They're 10-2, ranked number 9 or 10. Get to their conference championship game. They lose. They drop out. That's going to be really interesting to see what the committee does with those conference championship game losers. I've talked about that several times now, and that's probably going to be the biggest thing I'm looking for. With how they rank the teams of this 12-team playoff, what they do with those teams. But yeah, all these teams have a shot, and I think some people say Texas A&M, no chance. Go look at the schedule. They absolutely have a chance, and I think they might even have a team good enough to get to 10-2, and even 9-3 could possibly get a team in. I don't know about these 4 teams. I think Tennessee might be the only team that would have a real shot at 9-3. The schedules just aren't great for LSU, Texas A&M, and Missouri. Although LSU does, it kind of depends on your opponents. If USC turns out to be really good, and they beat them, that's a quality win. So, yeah, LSU may be thrown in that conversation as well. But Texas A&M and Missouri, they do have pretty easy schedules. So I think they both need to go 10-2. Again, depending on what happens with the opponents on the schedule, which is impossible to say right now. All right, let's go to the dark horses in the SEC: Auburn, Kentucky, and Oklahoma. Now, if we're just talking about how good the teams are, Oklahoma would have been on that last page, because I think Oklahoma is potentially better than Missouri, potentially better than, I think they got a great shot against Tennessee. So I think they're right in there with that mix of teams, but their schedule is brutal, and I think that schedule is ultimately what's going to hold them back. If an 8-4 team were to get in the college football playoff, it might be Oklahoma. Again, their schedule is that tough. So this is not a knock on Oklahoma's team. It's just their schedule. It's the way it sets up. It's going to be very, very tough. Auburn and Kentucky, schedules that aren't quite as bad as Oklahoma's. Auburn sets up pretty well. If they could somehow upset Alabama or Georgia on the road, they could absolutely get to 10-2. I picked them to go 9-3. I don't think they're quite going to get there, but they're a team to watch. And then Kentucky, their schedule's not horrible, and you've got a team that's pretty consistent every year. So I think they at least have to be mentioned here in the dark horse category. Let's go to the Big Ten now. I think there are two favorites. Some would put Michigan and Penn State in this list. I don't think so. I think these are your clear favorites. Could be wrong, but looking at it right now, again, I think Ohio State and Oregon are the favorites, and then you got your top at-large contenders: Michigan, Penn State, USC, and Iowa. And I think Michigan and Penn State might be closer to Ohio State and Oregon just overall. But again, the schedule is really tough for Michigan. Penn State's schedule is not quite as bad, so maybe you could throw Penn State in that top contender or favorites category. Michigan's one of their toughest games, though, is a non-conference game in Texas. But yeah, I'm going to say these teams have the best shot at getting an at-large spot. USC, I think it's going to be very tough for them to win the Big Ten this year. Iowa, very tough to win the Big Ten. But those teams could get to 10-2 potentially, maybe even a 9-3 for USC with their schedule. So yeah, I think these teams are your top at-large contenders out of the Big Ten. And then a couple of dark horses, Wisconsin and Nebraska. I think Wisconsin's going to have a good football team. And if it comes together, if Tyler Van Dyke can play the way that he played a couple of years ago at Miami, I think this team has a shot to maybe make a run. And then Nebraska, Dylan Raiola, what if he turns out to be an elite quarterback, a top 5 quarterback in the country? I don't really think it's going to happen, but it's possible. And their schedule sets up pretty well. So I think you can maybe throw them in that dark horse category. But more than likely, these teams, again, so I talked about a second ago, if you're a fan of these teams. If you're a fan of the teams in the dark horse categories, don't get your hopes up. Because, you could say maybe there's a chance, but you're probably not going to get to the college football playoff. All right, let's go to the ACC now. Your favorites are Clemson, Miami, Florida State, and NC State. How can Florida State be a favorite after that loss to Georgia Tech? Well, it was one game, and so I'm not going to overreact to that. If they go out and struggle against Boston College, lose another game, whatever, then maybe we drop them out of the ACC favorite category. But Clemson, Miami, NC State, Florida State. I love the way the schedule sets up for NC State. I think it gives them a real shot to get to the conference championship game. I believe these are the favorites. And then so you only have one real at-large contender, and they're not technically even in the ACC, but I'm putting Notre Dame in here just because they're affiliated with the ACC. So Notre Dame they have to be an at-large contender because they can't win a conference. So I just wanted to throw them in there. But then you go to your dark horses: SMU, North Carolina, Louisville, Virginia Tech, and Georgia Tech. So I don't think any of these teams really have a shot to get in as an at-large, but I think they're dark horses to win the ACC. So that's how they could get in. We could have a 3-loss team win the ACC. That wouldn't be crazy. When you look at all the games and the matchups, that could happen. So, yeah, these teams have a shot. I think, again, their path is to win the conference. I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think it'll be easier to win the ACC than get in as an at-large team, at least for these 5 teams. So that's my thoughts on the ACC. You go to the Big 12 now. Your favorites: Oklahoma State, Utah, West Virginia, Arizona, Kansas, and Kansas State. Before I talked about Oklahoma State and Utah maybe being a little bit ahead of these other teams, but I think all these teams are good enough to be in this category. So I'm going to say any of these teams, could be favorites to win the Big 12. And it's like the ACC. For these next group of teams, I don't think they're going to really have much of a chance to get in as an at-large, but they could be a dark horse to get to the Big 12 championship game and then possibly win that conference championship. So TCU, Colorado, Texas Tech, UCF, and Iowa State, I think these teams are all dark horses, again, to maybe win the Big 12. We could see a similar, like I just said, we could see something like I was talking about in the ACC, a 3-loss team, maybe even a 4-loss team sneaking in. There's a ton of parity in the Big 12. It could happen, so you never know. And then finally, we go to the group of 5 teams. So these seem to be the favorites for most people. I don't spend a lot of time on the group of 5. You guys know that when you dedicate as much time as I do to researching the Power 4 teams, it's just there's not the time to really spend a ton of time on the group of 5. But it seems like Miami of Ohio probably the favorite in the MAC. Liberty, everyone seems to be picking them out of Conference USA. App State out of the Sun Belt. Watch out for Texas State potentially there. In our season simulation on the college football game, they actually were the team to win the conference and get the at-large, or not the at-large, but get the group of 5 spot in the playoff. And then Memphis, I really like them. They were my pick to get the spot out of the group of 5. I think this is a really good football team. And then Boise State, the favorites out of the Mountain West. So these are your group of 5 favorites. And again, we'll start kind of just looking at the playoff picture these first few weeks, moving teams around wherever we need to move them before we start eliminating teams, which I think will happen by maybe week 5, maybe even week 4. We'll see. But that's the updated playoff picture, or the preseason playoff picture, I should say. Would love to get your thoughts on the playoff picture, and if you have any ideas on maybe how we can do this series in the early weeks, you can let me know that as well. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.